The dreadful Mafia lord asked a waitress when a man should kill, but her very first words left him completely speechless. Your support means everything. Like, comment, and subscribe so we can keep sharing stories like this. Let's start today's story. I'm curious, Miss Murphy, Stefano Ricci said, swirling whiskey in his crystal glass. When should a man kill? Janice Murphy's hand stilled over her notepad. After 9 hours on her feet at Rosso Sang, Manhattan's most exclusive Italian restaurant, this was exactly the kind of dangerous question she didn't need. I'm sorry, sir, she said carefully, her voice professionally pleasant though her dark eyes flickered with something unreadable. I serve food here, not moral philosophy. Stefano finally looked up from his drink, and for a brief moment, something shifted in his cold gray eyes. He'd expected fear or nervous laughter, not this composed young woman meeting his gaze with barely concealed defiance. Humor me, he said softly, the kind of soft that made grown men confess sins. It's a theoretical question. Where do you draw the line? Janice's colleagues had warned her about him. Stefano Ricci, 31, youngest don in New York history, worth billions in legitimate business and untold fortunes in blood money, known for his ruthless efficiency and the bodies that disappeared when he asked questions. She met his gaze directly. When all other paths to justice have closed. When innocent lives hang in the balance and only that single irreversible act stands between them and destruction. She paused, something fierce flickering in her expression. But never for pride. Never for revenge. Because the moment you kill for anything less than absolute necessity, you don't just take a life, you forfeit your own soul. The restaurant fell silent. Stefano's underboss, Marco Vitali, rose slightly from his seat at the adjacent table. 2 other men in dark suits shifted positions near the entrance. But Stefano himself simply stared, his whiskey glass frozen halfway to his lips. That's surprisingly. He searched for the word, philosophical. For a waitress. Did you expect me to say, never, like some naive idealist? Janice's voice remained steady. Or were you hoping I'd say always, so you could feel justified? Stefano set down his glass with deliberate care. Careful, Miss Murphy. Most people don't speak to me like that. Most people know who you are. She straightened her notepad. Now about your actual order. Wait. Stefano gestured to the empty chair across from him. Sit. 5 minutes. Explain your reasoning. I could lose my job. Stefano glanced toward the maitre d', who was already hurrying over. Antonio, I'm borrowing your server for a philosophical discussion. Any objections? Antonio's face went pale. Of course not, Mr. Ricci. Take all the time you need. Janice reluctantly sat, every instinct screaming that this was a mistake. This is highly inappropriate. So was your surprisingly sophisticated answer about the sanctity of human life. Stefano leaned forward, studying her with unsettling intensity. Where did that come from? Philosophy degree. Something like that. She kept her hands folded in her lap, refusing to show how fast her heart was racing. Columbia. Does it matter? You asked a question as a joke, testing me. I answered honestly. Not a joke, Stefano corrected quietly. Never a joke. I wanted to know what kind of person you are. His eyes never left her face. And you're right, I was expecting either fear or some moral superiority. Not wisdom. Wisdom. Janice almost laughed. You asked a waitress about murder over dinner. I asked about justice, he countered. And you're the first person in 3 years to understand the difference. Something dark crossed his expression. You said, when innocent lives hang in the balance. What about when innocent lives have already been taken? What about vengeance for the dead? The question hung between them, heavy with meaning Janice didn't fully understand. Vengeance doesn't bring them back, she said softly. It only creates more ghosts. More souls to carry. Justice is about the living, about preventing future harm. Revenge is about the pain of the person seeking it, And pain makes poor decisions. Stefano went completely still. Then for the first time in 3 years, since the night his 16-year-old sister was murdered, he smiled. Not the cruel smile his enemies saw before they died. Not the cold smile he wore for business. A real smile, touched with something that might have been hope. "Who are you?" he asked, genuinely perplexed by this woman who just challenged everything he'd built his empire upon. "Just a waitress with a philosophy degree and student loans," she replied, standing up. "Now, can I take your actual order, Mr. Ricci, or would you prefer to continue this therapy session?" Stefano studied her for a long moment. There was more to this story, he could feel it. But he recognized walls when he saw them. He'd built enough of his own. "Osso buco polenta and your full name." He pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table. "I'd like to continue this conversation. Tomorrow. My office. 7 p.m. "That's not going to happen. It's worth $500,000 for 1 hour of your time." Janice's hand froze, reaching for the card. "Excuse me. You heard me. 1 hour. I want to know if my path, the one I'm on right now, is justice or vengeance." His gray eyes held hers. "And I think you're the only person brave enough to tell me the truth." "Why would you trust a stranger?" "Because everyone else is too afraid to lie to me," Stefano said quietly. "Which means they're too afraid to tell me the truth. But you..." He gestured at the card. "You see me as a man first, a monster second. That's rare. Valuable." Janice looked at the card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering, and address in Tribeca. Then back at the man offering her $500,000 for honesty. "I'll think about it," she said, pocketing the card before Antonio could see. "No, you won't," Stefano replied with certainty. "You'll come. Because you're curious now too. You want to know if a man like me can be saved." He wasn't wrong. And that terrified her more than his reputation ever could. Stefano Ricci returned the next night. And the night after that. And every night for a week. "He's in your section again," Maria whispered, nodding toward table 7 where Stefano sat alone, reading what looked like a philosophy textbook. "Third night in a row. That's not normal, Janice." Nothing about this was normal. Especially not the $10,000 tip he'd left after their first conversation, tucked inside a leather portfolio with a single word written on the card. "Soon." Janice approached his table with practiced professionalism, though her pulse quickened. "Good evening, Mr. Ricci." "The usual." "Actually, I have a different order tonight." He closed the book, Kierkegaard's Fear and Trembling, and looked up at her. "I want your opinion on mercy. Specifically, does showing mercy to the guilty constitute injustice to the innocent?" "That's not on the menu either, sir." "Humor me, Miss Murphy. You're good at this." His gray eyes held a challenge. "Or are you afraid of the answer?" She shouldn't engage. Every survival instinct screamed to take his order, bring his food, and stay far away from whatever darkness lived behind those calculating eyes. But something about the genuine curiosity in his expression, the way he held that philosophy book like it actually mattered. "Mercy and justice aren't opposites," she said quietly, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "They're partners. Justice without mercy becomes tyranny. Mercy without justice becomes chaos. The real question is whether the person offering mercy has the authority to do so, or if they're simply avoiding the harder path of true accountability." Stefano's expression shifted, something like satisfaction crossing his features. "And if accountability isn't possible? If the systems meant to deliver justice are broken or corrupt? Then you fix the system. You don't become another broken piece of it." "Idealistic," he murmured, though not unkindly. "What if fixing the system takes too long? What if people suffer while you're busy being righteous? What if your impatience creates more suffering than it prevents?" Janice countered. "Vigilante justice feels satisfying in the moment, but it's just revenge wearing a hero's mask." For a long moment, Stefano simply studied her. Then he smiled, That same genuine smile from their first meeting. Sit. Please. 5 minutes. Mr. Ricci. Stefano. And I'm a paying customer making a reasonable request. He gestured to the chair. Besides, Antonio's already looking the other way. I may have mentioned I'm considering a significant investment in this establishment. Janice reluctantly sat, pulse racing. You're bribing the management so you can interrogate me about philosophy? I'm ensuring we're not interrupted. There's a difference. He leaned forward slightly. Last night I asked myself why I keep coming back here. Why I care what a waitress thinks about morality and justice. And because everyone else in my life tells me what I want to hear. You tell me what I need to hear. Even when it's uncomfortable. His voice dropped lower. Especially when it's uncomfortable. I'm not your therapist, Mr. Ricci. Stefano, he corrected again. And no, you're not. You're something rarer. Someone without an agenda. Someone who doesn't know enough about me to be afraid, but intelligent enough to see the questions I'm actually asking. Janice's chest tightened. What questions are those? Whether redemption is possible for someone who's gone too far. The words came out quietly, almost vulnerable. Whether there's a difference between justice and vengeance when the person you're avenging can't speak for themselves anymore. The pain in his voice was real. Raw. And suddenly Janice understood. This wasn't academic philosophy. This was personal. Who did you lose? She asked softly. Stefano's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my sister. Isabella. 16 years old, killed 3 years ago because she was related to me. Because of my world, my choices. His hands curled into fists on the table. The men responsible are still breathing. Tell me, Miss Murphy, is it justice or vengeance that makes me want to change that? Janice's breath caught. This wasn't a philosophical exercise. This was a confession. A warning. Maybe both. That depends, she said carefully, on whether you're killing them to protect others or to ease your own pain. And if it's both? Then you need to figure out which one you can live with. She stood heart-hammering. Because revenge might feel like closure, but it's really just another open wound. She walked away before he could respond, before she could see whether her words landed or simply made her his enemy. But when she returned to clear his table an hour later, there was another $10,000 tip. And underneath it, a single question written in precise handwriting. What if I told you I'm running out of time to choose? The envelope arrived at Janice's apartment 3 days later, delivered by a man in an expensive suit who simply nodded and left without a word. Inside was a card with an address in Tribeca and a time. 7 p.m. tonight. No signature. No explanation. But Janice knew exactly who sent it. She should have thrown it away. Should have blocked whatever avenue Stefano Ricci used to find her home address. Instead, she found herself standing outside a luxury high-rise at 6:58 p.m., staring up at the gleaming glass tower and questioning every decision that led her here. The penthouse elevator required a key card. The security guard handed her one without asking her name. Mr. Ricci is expecting you, Miss Murphy. 42nd floor. The elevator doors opened directly into a sprawling penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Stefano stood by the windows, still in his suit from earlier, a glass of whiskey in hand. You came, he said without turning around. You knew I would. Hoped. Not knew. He finally turned to face her. Can I offer you something to drink? Answers. Janice stayed near the elevator, every muscle tensed for flight. Starting with why you had me investigated enough to find my home address. Fair question. Stefano gestured to the leather sofa. Please sit. This will take a few minutes. She didn't move. I'm fine standing. Also fair. He took a slow sip of his whiskey. I assume you know who I am by now. Really no, not just the name. Stefano Ricci. Head of the Ricci family. Organized crime, money laundering, extortion, And that's just what's documented. Janice's voice remained steady despite her racing heart. 3 years ago you took over after your father died in prison. Since then you've consolidated power, eliminated rivals, and built a reputation for being absolutely ruthless. They call you the Ice King because apparently you don't feel anything when you kill people. That last part isn't entirely accurate, Stefano said quietly. I feel everything. I've just learned to live with it. He set down his glass. But you're right about the rest. I'm a criminal, Miss Murphy. A very successful, very wealthy, very dangerous criminal. Then why am I here instead of running to the police? Because you're curious. And because I'm about to offer you something you desperately need. He pulled out a folder, sliding it across the coffee table toward her. Janice Elizabeth Murphy, formerly Elena Janice Murphy. 28 years old. Columbia graduate, philosophy and ethics double major, full scholarship. Your mother, Patricia Murphy, was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 6 months ago. Experimental treatment at Sloan Kettering, not covered by insurance. Current medical debt, $473,000 and climbing. Janice's blood ran cold. You investigated my mother? I investigate everyone who interests me. It's how I stay alive. His expression softened slightly. I'm sorry about your mother. Truly. Cancer is a ruthless enemy, one even I can't intimidate or negotiate with. If this is some kind of leverage, it's context. Stefano moved closer, though he kept a respectful distance. I meant what I said at the restaurant. I need someone who isn't afraid to tell me the truth. Someone who can help me navigate the moral weight of the decisions I make daily. You want a priest? Get a priest. I want a conscience. Priests are bound by confession and faith. You're bound by reason and philosophy. He paused. And unlike everyone else in my world, you have no reason to lie to me because you don't fear me enough to need to. I should fear you. Probably. But you don't, which makes you invaluable. He pulled out another document. I'm offering you a contract. $500,000 for 6 months of consultation. You advise me on the ethical implications of my business decisions. All of them legal and otherwise. You tell me when I'm crossing lines that can't be uncrossed. You become my moral compass in a world that has none. Janice stared at the contract, her hands trembling. $500,000. Her mother's treatment. Maybe even a cure. All she had to do was sell her soul to a mafia lord. Why? She whispered. Why does someone like you care about morality? Stefano's expression grew distant, haunted. Because 3 years ago I stopped caring. I became exactly what everyone feared. A monster without hesitation, without mercy. And it worked. I won. I survived. My family thrived. He met her eyes. But I lost something along the way. Something I didn't realize mattered until it was gone. You made me remember what that felt like. To question, to doubt, to actually care about the difference between justice and revenge. This is insane. Yes. But your mother has 8 months, maybe less, without treatment. And you're a waitress with a philosophy degree and crushing debt. His voice wasn't cruel, just honest. I'm offering you a chance to save her. All you have to do is help me save myself. Janice closed her eyes, thinking of her mother's frail hand in hers, the doctor's grim prognosis, the bills stacking up like a death sentence. If I do this, she said slowly, I need your word that you won't hurt my family. Ever. No matter what I tell you. You have it. And I need the money up front. Half now, half when the contract ends. Done. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. Then God help me, I accept. Stefano smiled, but there was no triumph in it. Only relief. No, Miss Murphy. God help us both. The money arrived in Janice's account the next morning. $250,000, transferred from a shell corporation with a Cayman Islands address. Immediate. Irreversible. She'd sold her soul and it had cleared within 24 hours. The text came that afternoon. Il Serpent. 9 p.m. Dress professionally. Il Serpent turned out to be a private club in the meatpacking district, the kind of place without a sign, where security recognized faces instead of checking IDs. The doorman took one look at Janice's name on his tablet and stepped aside without a word. Inside was all dark wood, leather booths and the subtle scent of expensive cigars. Men in tailored suits conducted business in quiet corners while women in designer dresses laughed at unfunny jokes. The kind of establishment where everyone had secrets and no one asked questions. Stefano sat at a corner table with 3 other men. He stood when he saw her, gesturing her over. "Gentlemen, this is Miss Murphy, the consultant I mentioned. Janice, meet my associates." He indicated each man in turn. "Luca handles our legal ventures. Antonio manages logistics. And this is Marco Vitali, my underboss and oldest friend." Marco didn't stand. He simply studied Janice with cold, calculating eyes that reminded her of a predator sizing up prey. He was older than Stefano by perhaps a decade, with a scar running through his left eyebrow and the kind of stillness that suggested violence held in careful check. "The Waitress philosopher," Marco said, his voice rough like gravel. "Stefano's told us about your unique qualifications. Mr. Vitali." Janice met his gaze without flinching, though her instincts screamed danger. "She's here to provide ethical consultation," Stefano interjected smoothly. "Starting tonight if you're ready, Miss Murphy? That's why I'm here." Stefano nodded to the others who took the hint and relocated to another table. Only Marco remained, arms crossed, clearly having no intention of leaving. "Marco stays," Stefano said, reading Janice's expression. "He needs to understand how this works. And honestly, he's the one who usually talks me out of my more questionable impulses." "Someone has to," Marco muttered. "Since apparently we're now taking moral guidance from civilians." Stefano ignored the jab, pulling out a file folder. "Your first case. Carlo Benedetti owns a restaurant in Little Italy, borrowed $300,000 from us 18 months ago to avoid bankruptcy. He's 6 months behind on payments. Standard protocol is to collect, aggressively if necessary, or make an example that ensures others pay on time." "An example?" Janice asked carefully. "Broken bones. Maybe his restaurant burns down. Maybe worse, depending on how defiant he is." Stefano's voice remained neutral, professional. "It's business. We can't appear weak or every debtor in the city will think they can skip payments." Janice's stomach turned. "What's the alternative?" "Forgiveness. But that creates its own problems." Marco leaned forward, his tone harsh. "Word gets out that Stefano's going soft, and suddenly we've got a dozen Benedettis thinking they can cry poverty and walk away from legitimate debts. Reputation is currency in our world, Miss Murphy. Lose it and you lose everything." "Show me his file," Janice said. Stefano slid it across. Inside were financial records, surveillance photos, background checks. Carlo Benedetti, 53, widowed 5 years ago. 2 daughters, 17 and 14. The restaurant was barely staying afloat, hemorrhaging money despite his best efforts. Medical bills for his younger daughter's diabetes treatment. A second mortgage on his house already in default. "He's desperate," Janice said quietly, looking up. "Not defiant. There's a difference." "Desperation doesn't pay debts," Marco countered. "No, but it explains why the payments stopped." He turned to Stefano. "Has anyone actually talked to him? Asked what happened?" "We don't ask. We collect." Marco's eyes narrowed. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. He's going to make you weak, Stefano. Compassion in our business gets you killed." "Maybe," Stefano said, still watching Janice. "Or maybe strength is knowing when to bend instead of break. Continue, Miss Murphy. What's your recommendation?" Janice took a breath, feeling the weight of this moment. A man's life, maybe his family's lives, hung on what she said next. "Give him an extension. 6 months, interest-free, but with a condition. He works directly with one of your financial advisors to restructure his restaurant's operations. If he follows the plan and shows genuine effort, you convert the debt to a business partnership. You get 20% equity, he gets to keep his family legacy, and you gain a loyal restaurant owner instead of a terrified debtor. Marco laughed, sharp and bitter. A business partnership? We're the Mafia, not a venture capital firm. You're both, Janice countered, meeting his hostile gaze. Stefano said you run legitimate businesses too. This becomes one of them. Carlo gets to save face. He's not being forgiven, he's being invested in. Your reputation stays intact because you're being strategic, not soft. And if he fails after 6 months of genuine support, then you collect. But at least you'll know you gave him a real chance. Stefano was quiet for a long moment, fingers steepled under his chin. Then he smiled. Marco, make the call. Set up the meeting with Carlo. We're restructuring the debt as Miss Murphy suggested. This is a mistake, Marco said flatly. Then it's my mistake to make. Stefano's voice hardened just enough to remind everyone who was in charge. And if I'm wrong, you can say, I told you so over Carlo's grave. But we're trying this first. Marco stood abruptly and walked away, radiating disapproval. Stefano turned back to Janice. Congratulations, Miss Murphy. You just saved a man's life. Let's hope you're right about this. So do I, Janice whispered, suddenly aware of the enormous weight she'd just taken on. Because if she was wrong, Carlo Benedetti's blood would be on her hands. 3 weeks into the arrangement, Stefano called Janice to his penthouse at midnight. Not the club. Not a restaurant. His private space. She almost didn't go. Late-night summons felt different. More dangerous, more personal. But the text had been simple. I need to tell you why I'm doing this. Please come. When she arrived, he was standing by the windows again, but this time there was no whiskey, no calculated composure. Just a man staring at the city lights like they held answers he couldn't find. I want to show you something, he said without preamble, gesturing to the hallway. Follow me. He led her to a room she hadn't seen before. A study lined with bookshelves dominated by a large mahogany desk. But what caught her attention was the wall above the fireplace. A portrait of a young girl, maybe 16, with Stefano's gray eyes but a softer face, full of life and laughter. She wore a school uniform, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, captured mid-smile like she'd just heard the best joke in the world. Isabella, Stefano said quietly. My sister. She was supposed to graduate high school that year. Had a full scholarship to NYU for pre-med. Wanted to be a pediatrician. His voice cracked almost imperceptibly. She was everything good that our family had left. Janice stared at the portrait, her chest tightening. Stefano. 3 years ago, the Castellano family decided they wanted our territory. They hit one of our shipments, killed 2 of our men. He moved closer to the portrait, his hands clenched. Standard mob warfare. I was ready to retaliate, negotiate, whatever it took. But they didn't want negotiation. They wanted extinction. What happened? Isabella was leaving school late. Debate club practice. She wanted to argue for a living, imagine that. A bitter smile crossed his face. They followed her. Waited until she was on a quiet street. 3 armed men against a 16-year-old girl with a backpack full of textbooks. Janice felt tears prick her eyes. Oh God. The official story is she was caught in crossfire. That they were aiming at me or Marco or someone that mattered in the organization. Stefano's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. But the coroner's report showed execution-style wounds. They made her kneel. They made her beg. And then they shot my baby sister in the head to send me a message. Stefano, I'm so sorry. I found her. His hands were shaking now, the first time Janice had ever seen him lose composure. I was the one who got the call. I was the one who identified her body. I was the one who had to tell my mother that her only daughter, her innocent daughter, was dead because of this world I'd chosen. Janice moved closer, instinctively reaching for his arm. That wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? He turned to her and the raw pain in his eyes nearly broke her. I took over the family business. I escalated conflicts with rivals. I made us a target. And Isabella paid the price for my choices. You didn't pull the trigger. No. But I painted the target on her back. He pulled away, pacing. For 3 years I've been hunting the men responsible. Antonio Castellano ordered it. His sons carried it out, Dominic and Vincent. I've tracked them, gathered evidence, waited for the right moment. I've become everything they feared, ruthless, patient, absolutely merciless. And now you're close, Janice said softly, understanding flooding through her. They're in hiding. Brooklyn. I found them 2 weeks ago. Stefano's jaw tightened. I can end this. I can make them pay for what they did to Isabella. I have the men, the resources, the justification. One word from me and they're dead by morning. But you're asking me first. Because I need to know. He faced her fully, vulnerability and desperation warring in his expression. Is this justice? Is avenging my sister, making her killers pay for murdering an innocent girl? Is that justice, or am I just another monster using grief as an excuse? Janice's breath caught. This was the real test. Not Carlo Benedetti's debt or business decisions. This was about a brother's love, a killer's conscience, and the impossible line between righteous fury and blind vengeance. Tell me honestly, Stefano continued, his voice raw. If you were me, if someone murdered your mother, your family, what would you do? Would you turn them over to a justice system that's never touched men like the Castellanos? Or would you deliver the justice they actually deserve? I don't know, Janice admitted, tears streaming down her face now. God help me, Stefano, I don't know. Because everything I believe says vengeance is wrong, that 2 wrongs don't make a right. But Isabella was 16. She was innocent. And they executed her like she was nothing. So what do I do? The question came out broken, desperate. Because in 72 hours I'm supposed to give the order. And I need someone to tell me if I'm about to damn my soul or finally give my sister the justice she deserves. Janice looked at the portrait, at Isabella's bright smile, her whole future stolen, and then at Stefano, this dangerous man carrying 3 years of grief like an open wound. I'll tell you, she whispered. But first I need to understand something. If you kill them, will it bring her back? Will it make the pain stop? Or will it just create another ghost for you to carry? Stefano's silence was answer enough. And Janice realized she was no longer just his consultant. She was the only thing standing between him and the darkness that had been swallowing him whole since the day his sister died. The call came at 2 a.m. Marco's voice, flat and emotionless. We have a situation. Stefano wants you here. Now. It's the middle of the night. I don't care if it's Christmas morning. Get dressed. Cars outside. The warehouse in Red Hook looked abandoned from the outside, but inside was a different story. Armed men. Harsh fluorescent lights. And in the center of the concrete floor, a man zip-tied to a metal chair, blood streaming from his nose and mouth. Janice froze in the doorway, her stomach lurching. Stefano stood over the man, his white shirt splattered with red, his knuckles split and bleeding. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment, something like shame flickered across his face. Miss Murphy. I'm glad you're here. His voice was eerily calm, clinical. This is Vincent Castellano. One of the men who killed my sister. The man in the chair spat blood. I ain't telling you nothing, Ricci. Do your worst. Oh, I will. Stefano picked up a pair of pliers from a nearby table. But first I want Miss Murphy to understand exactly who she's been defending. Tell her, Vincent. Tell her what you did to Isabella. Stefano, stop. Janice stepped forward, her voice shaking. Tell her. Stefano roared, slamming his fist into Vincent's jaw. The crack echoed through the warehouse. Tell her how a 16-year-old girl begged for her life. tell her how you made her kneel in the street like a dog." Vincent laughed through broken teeth. "She cried like a little bitch. Begged us to let her go. Said her brother would pay anything." Stefano's next punch silenced him. And the next. And the next. Blood sprayed. Bones cracked. Janice watched in frozen horror as the man she'd been consulting with, the man who'd discussed philosophy and morality over expensive wine, became something else entirely. A monster. Exactly what everyone said he was. "Stefano, please." Her voice broke. "This isn't justice. This is what justice looks like in my world." He whirled on her, pliers still in hand, his gray eyes wild with grief and rage. "You want to know if I can be saved? Look at me, Janice. This is who I am. This is what I do to people who hurt my family." She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at the blood on his hands, the violence in his eyes, the absolute absence of the man who'd stood in front of Isabella's portrait and wept. "I can't," she stumbled backward toward the door. "I can't be part of this. I'm done." "Janice, wait. You're a monster." The words tore out of her. "I thought I could help you, that maybe there was something redeemable, but this," she gestured at Vincent's broken form. "This isn't justice. It's just cruelty. You're no better than they are." She turned and ran, tears streaming down her face, her hands shaking so badly she could barely work her phone to call an Uber. Behind her, she heard Marco say something to Stefano, heard the warehouse door slam. Then footsteps. Running. "Janice, stop." Stefano grabbed her arm, spinning her around. His face was a mess of blood and tears, his composure completely shattered. "Please. Just listen. Let me go. I need you." The words came out desperate, broken. "God help me, I need you to see this. To see what I become when you're not there, to remind me that there's another way. Then stop. Stop torturing people. Stop being this." "I can't." His voice cracked. "Don't you understand? For 3 years this is all I've been. Violence and vengeance and emptiness. I don't know how to be anything else anymore. But when you're there, when you look at me like I'm still human, like there's still something worth saving." He released her arm, stepping back. "You're the only thing keeping me from crossing the line I can't come back from. I already watched you cross it in there." "No. That was restraint." His laugh was bitter, self-loathing. "If you hadn't been there, Vincent would be dead right now. Painfully. Fully. I would have enjoyed it. But I stopped because you were watching. Because I couldn't bear to see that look in your eyes, the one you're giving me right now." Janice wrapped her arms around herself, shaking. "I'm not your conscience. I'm not responsible for stopping you from being who you are. I know. But you're the only person who makes me want to be better." He reached toward her, then dropped his hand. "The only person who reminds me that Isabella wouldn't want this. That she'd be ashamed of what I've become. Then honor her by being better. By choosing justice over vengeance." "I don't know if I can." The admission came out raw, honest. "But I'm trying. These 3 weeks with you, questioning my decisions, forcing me to think before I act. That's the most human I've felt since she died." Janice looked at this broken, dangerous man covered in another person's blood, and felt something she shouldn't. Compassion. Not for what he'd done, but for what he'd lost. For the brother who couldn't save his sister. For the man drowning in grief who'd forgotten how to breathe. "If I stay," she said quietly, "things have to change. No more torture. No more brutality. You want my guidance? Then you actually have to listen to it." "I will." "And Vincent goes to the police. With evidence. Let the system handle him." Stefano's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "All right. But if the system fails, then we find another way. Together. But no more of this." She gestured at the warehouse. "Promise me." He met her eyes, and for a moment she saw the man he used to be. The man he could be again. "I promise." It was probably a lie. Probably a temporary reprieve before the darkness swallowed him again. But Janice had just learned something terrifying about herself. She was willing to risk everything to find out. The woman was waiting outside Janice's apartment building when she got home from the restaurant. Professional pantsuit, badge on her belt, the kind of patient posture that said she'd been standing there for hours. "Miss Murphy? I'm Special Agent Sarah Chin, FBI Organized Crime Division. We need to talk." Janice's blood ran cold. "I haven't done anything wrong." "I know. That's why I'm here." Sarah gestured to a black SUV parked across the street. 5 minutes. Please. It's important." Every instinct screamed to run, to call Stefano, to do anything but get in that vehicle. But Janice had learned enough about the criminal world to know that refusing the FBI only made you look guilty. The SUV's interior was sterile, professional. Sarah sat across from her, pulling out a tablet with surveillance photos. Janice leaving Ilse Pent. Janice entering Stefano's penthouse. Janice at the Red Hook warehouse. "We've been watching Stefano Ricci for 3 years, Sarah said, her voice matter-of-fact. "Ever since his sister was murdered, and he went on a very quiet, very methodical campaign of revenge. We know about the Castellano brothers. We know he's planning to kill them. Then arrest him. We don't have enough evidence that would stand up in court. Yet." Sarah leaned forward. "But we do have evidence of you accepting $250,000 from a known criminal organization. That's money laundering, conspiracy, potentially RICO charges depending on what you've been doing for him." Janice's hands clenched. "I'm a consultant. Completely legal." "Consulting on what?" "Philosophy." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Janice, I've read your file. Columbia graduate, brilliant academic record, mother dying of cancer. You're not a criminal. You're desperate. And Stefano Ricci is very good at exploiting desperation. He hasn't exploited anything. I went to him willingly. Because he offered you money you couldn't refuse for a mother you can't save any other way." Sarah pulled up another file. Patricia Murphy. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Experimental treatment at Sloan Kettering, currently funded by blood money from the Ricci organization. Do you think your mother would want to live knowing her treatment came from murder and extortion? The words hit like a physical blow. That's not fair. None of this is fair. Your mother's cancer isn't fair. Isabella Ricci's murder wasn't fair. But you're enabling a man who's about to commit homicide, and when he does, you'll be an accomplice. Sarah's voice gentled. "I'm offering you a way out. Testify about what you've seen. Wear a wire. Help us build a case against the Ricci organization. In exchange, we'll protect you and your mother. Full immunity, witness protection if necessary, and your mother's treatment continues through federal medical assistance. You want me to betray him. I want to prevent a bloodbath." Sarah showed her crime scene photos. Bodies, blood, the brutal aftermath of mob warfare. This is what happens when men like Stefano Ricci stop pretending to be civilized. Vincent and Dominic Castellano have families. Children. When Stefano kills them, those children will grow up and want revenge, and the cycle continues forever. Janice stared at the photos, her stomach churning. What if he deserves justice for his sister? Then let the justice system handle it. We have evidence against the Castellanos. We can prosecute. But we need Stefano to stand down, and you're the only person he listens to. Sarah's eyes were intense, pleading. You have influence over him. Use it. Help us stop this before more people die. For a long moment, Janice sat in silence, weighing everything. The right choice was obvious. Cooperate with law enforcement, stop Stefano from becoming a killer, protect innocent lives. But when she closed her eyes, she didn't see a monster. She saw a man weeping in front of his sister's portrait. A man desperately trying to hold on to his humanity while grief dragged him toward darkness. A man who'd trusted her with his pain, his questions, his impossible choice. And she realized with horrifying clarity, she wasn't objective anymore. Somewhere between philosophy debates and warehouse confrontations, Between blood-stained confessions and desperate promises to be better, she'd fallen in love with him. Not with the violence, not with the power, but with the man underneath, the one fighting himself every single day. The one who asked her about morality because he genuinely wanted to find another way, even if he didn't know how. "No," Janice said quietly, opening her eyes. "Janice. I'm not wearing a wire. I'm not testifying. I'm not betraying him." She met Sarah's shocked gaze. "And before you threaten me with charges, know that I'll take whatever consequences come. But I won't be the reason he loses the last person trying to help him be better." "You're in love with him." Sarah's voice held disbelief and pity. "God, you've actually fallen for a mobster." "I've fallen for a man who's trying not to be one." Janice reached for the door handle. "If you want to arrest him, do it. But it won't be because of me. He's going to hurt you. Men like that always do." "Maybe." Janice stepped out of the SUV. "But maybe I can save him first. Isn't that worth the risk?" Sarah's expression was sad, knowing. "No, Janice. It never is." But Janice was already walking away, her phone in her hand, Stefano's number on the screen. Because she'd just made her choice. And there was no going back now. Marco Vitali had survived 20 years in the Mafia by trusting his instincts. And every instinct he had screamed that something was wrong with Janice Murphy. He sat in his office above a legitimate shipping company, staring at the background check he'd commissioned from their best investigator. Standard search had come back clean. Columbia graduate, restaurant worker, sick mother. Nothing suspicious. But Marco hadn't survived this long by accepting surface answers. "Dig deeper," he told his investigator. "Before Columbia. Before the restaurant. Find out who she really is." The report arrived 3 days later, and Marco felt his blood turn to ice as he read it. Janice Murphy didn't exist before 4 years ago. But Elena Janice Murphy did. Daughter of District Attorney Robert Murphy, the man who'd prosecuted Stefano's father on RICO charges 15 years ago. The man whose relentless investigation had sent Dominic Ricci to prison, where he died of a heart attack 3 years later, leaving a 21-year-old Stefano to inherit an empire. Marco's hands crushed the edges of the report. She'd been using her middle name, living under partial cover. And she'd somehow inserted herself into Stefano's life right when he was most vulnerable. This wasn't coincidence. This was infiltration. He found Stefano at the penthouse, laughing at something on his phone. Probably a text from her. The sound made Marco's jaw clench. He hadn't heard Stefano laugh genuinely in 3 years. And now this woman, this liar, had wormed her way in deep enough to bring it back. "We need to talk," Marco said, closing the door behind him. Stefano looked up, smile fading at Marco's expression. "What's wrong?" Marco threw the file on the desk. "Your moral compass has a name. Several names, actually." "What are you talking about?" "Janice Murphy." "Except that's not her real name, is it?" "It's Elena Janice Murphy." "Ring any bells?" Marco's voice was hard, controlled fury. "Daughter of Robert Murphy. The DA who destroyed your father." The color drained from Stefano's face. "No. That's not. I had her investigated. Really investigated. Birth certificate, high school records, everything." Marco pulled out documents, spreading them across the desk like evidence at a trial. She changed her name legally 4 years ago, started using only her middle name. Moved to Manhattan, got a job at Rosso Sang, the restaurant your family has connections to, by the way. And then, by pure coincidence, she ends up serving you. Fascinating you with her philosophy degree and her moral superiority. There has to be an explanation. The explanation is she's been playing you. Marco slammed his fist on the desk. "Think about it, Stefano. The timing? Right when you're about to move on the Castellanos. Right when you're most vulnerable about Isabella. She shows up like some guardian angel, makes you question everything, gets you to trust her. She doesn't know who I am. Who my father was. Doesn't she?" Marco's laugh was bitter. She's Robert Murphy's daughter. You think she doesn't know exactly who the Ricci family is? You are. Her father spent years building the case that killed yours. You think she just forgot? Stefano sank into his chair, the report in his shaking hands. There was her birth certificate. Elena Janice Murphy, daughter of Robert and Patricia Murphy. Her high school yearbook photo with the name Elena Murphy underneath. The legal name change filed 4 years ago. All of it real. All of it damning. Why? He whispered. Why would she? Revenge? Guilt? Maybe the FBI got to her. Marco leaned forward. Or maybe she's just like her father. Sees us as criminals who need to be stopped, and she's willing to lie, manipulate, and seduce you to do it. She wouldn't. You don't know what she would do. You don't know her at all. Marco's voice cracked with genuine pain. Stefano, I've watched you fall for this woman. I've watched you change your entire approach to business, second-guess every decision, go soft on enemies who would kill you without hesitation. And now I know why. She's been systematically dismantling everything your father built. Stefano's phone buzzed. A text from Janice. Dinner tonight? I have thoughts on the Benedetti partnership. It's working beautifully. The words that would have made him smile an hour ago now felt like mockery. What do you want me to do? He asked quietly, the warmth in his voice completely gone. Confront her. Tonight. Before the Castellano operation. Marco's expression was grim. Because if she's FBI, if she's working against us, she knows about the plan. And if she tips them off, everyone dies. Stefano stood, his face a careful mask. Set it up. The warehouse. Tomorrow night. We handle the Castellanos and we handle her. And if she's innocent? If there's an explanation. Stefano looked at his oldest friend and Marco saw something terrible in his eyes. The warmth Janice had cultivated was gone, replaced by the ice that had earned him his nickname. Then she should have told me the truth from the beginning, Stefano said coldly. Because in our world, Marco, lies are unforgivable. Even pretty ones. Especially pretty ones. The warehouse was the same one where Janice had watched Stefano torture Vincent Castellano. But tonight both brothers were here. Vincent and Dominic zip-tied to chairs, bloodied but conscious. Stefano's men formed a perimeter, weapons ready. And in the center of it all stood Stefano, a gun in his hand, 3 years of grief culminating in this single moment. Janice arrived thinking she'd been summoned to counsel him one last time. To help him choose justice over vengeance. She didn't see Marco's cold smile or the way Stefano's men shifted to block the exits. Stefano. She approached cautiously, sensing something wrong. What's happening? Tell me your name, he said without turning around, his voice empty of all warmth. You know my name. Your full name. The one you were born with. Now he turned and the look in his eyes made her blood freeze. Tell me or Marco will. Janice's heart stopped. No. Not now. Not like this. Elena Janice Murphy, Marco said from the shadows, stepping forward with a file folder. Daughter of District Attorney Robert Murphy. The man who sent Stefano's father to prison. The man who destroyed the Ricci family 15 years ago. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Stefano, I can explain, Janice started, but Dominic Castellano's laughter cut her off. Oh, this is rich. Dominic spat blood. The Ice King got played by a DA's daughter. Did she come here to finish what Daddy started, Ricci? Destroy you from the inside. Shut up, Stefano said quietly, but his gun hand was shaking. I didn't know, Janice said desperately, stepping closer. When we met, I didn't know who you were. I changed my name years ago to escape my father's world. Convenient. Marco's voice was acid. You just happened to work at a restaurant with Ricci family connections. Just happened to serve Stefano on the anniversary of his father's death. Just happened to have all the answers he needed to hear. It wasn't like that. Tears streamed down Janice's face. Yes, I knew who the Ricci family was. Everyone in law enforcement does. But I didn't know you were Stefano Ricci until after our first conversation. By then you saw an opportunity. Stefano's voice was flat, dead. The son of the man your father destroyed. What better revenge than to make me fall in love with you? Make me weak? Make me doubt everything I've built? I wasn't trying to make you fall in love with me. I was trying to help you. Her voice broke. Everything I told you about justice, about mercy, about not letting vengeance destroy your soul. I meant it. All of it. Did you? Stefano finally met her eyes and she saw the devastation there. The betrayal. Or were you just your father's daughter trying to reform the criminal, save the monster? Maybe at first, she admitted, the truth ripping out of her. Maybe for 5 minutes I thought about what my father would want. But then I saw you, Stefano. Not the Mafia lord. Not the Ice King. I saw a man drowning in grief who didn't know how to save himself. And I fell in love with that man. Love. He laughed bitterly. You don't even know what that word means. Love is truth. Love is honesty. Love isn't lying about who you are for 3 months while you systematically dismantle someone's will to survive. Vincent spat at Janice's feet. Just kill them both, Ricci. Her and us. Clean slate. Show the world what happens to people who betray you. Stefano raised his gun, pointing it at Janice. His hand was steady now, his face the cold mask she'd seen in the warehouse. The Ice King returned in full. Stefano, please. She didn't beg for her life. He begged for his soul. Don't do this. Don't let them win. Isabella wouldn't want. Don't you dare say her name. He stepped closer, gun pressed to her forehead. You don't get to invoke my sister. You don't get to pretend you understand what she'd want. You're just like them, a liar who took something precious and destroyed it. Then pull the trigger. Janice stood tall, tears streaming but voice steady. If that's who you are, if 3 months of conversations, of growth, of learning to be human again, if all of that was a lie, then pull the trigger. Prove Marco right. Prove that I wasted my time trying to save someone already lost. Stefano's finger tightened on the trigger. Behind him, the Castellano brothers watched with sick fascination. Marco waited stone-faced. But know this, Janice whispered, looking into his eyes. I love you. Not the criminal. Not the empire. The man who stood in front of his sister's portrait and wept. The man who asked me if redemption was possible. That man is worth saving. That man is worth believing in. She closed her eyes. But if you pull that trigger, he dies too. And you'll spend the rest of your life as exactly what they say you are. A monster incapable of mercy. The warehouse fell silent. Stefano's hand trembled. The gun pressed harder against her skin. And then with a roar of anguish he turned and emptied the entire clip into the wall, bullets shredding concrete and metal. When the echoes faded, Stefano stood there shaking, the empty gun dangling from his hand. Get them out, he said hoarsely. The Castellanos. Call the FBI. Give them everything, evidence, testimony, all of it. Stefano. Marco stepped forward. I said get them out. Stefano's voice cracked. 3 years. 3 years I've been planning this, and for what? To become exactly what killed my sister. To prove that violence only breeds more violence. He looked at Janice, devastation in his eyes. She's right. Isabella would be ashamed of what I've become. What I almost did. He dropped the gun and walked away, leaving Janice standing there alive, Marco staring in shock, and the Castellano brothers realizing they'd just witnessed the impossible. The Ice King had chosen mercy. And it had broken him completely. 6 months later, Janice stood outside the Manhattan District Attorney's office, staring at her father's name on the directory. Robert Murphy, District Attorney. 4 years of running, hiding, pretending to be someone else, and it all led back here. He pushed through the doors. Robert Murphy looked older than she remembered, gray threading through his dark hair, lines etched deeper around his eyes. But when he saw her standing in his doorway, those eyes filled with tears. Elena, he whispered, using the name she'd abandoned. By God, you came back. I go by Janice now, she said quietly. But yes, I came back. And I need to tell you everything. They talked for 3 hours. About her mother's cancer, about Stefano, about the impossible 6 months she'd spent trying to save a man's soul while losing pieces of her own. Robert listened without judgment, without the righteous condemnation she'd expected. Your mother told me you'd found your way, he said when she finished. I didn't understand what she meant. Now I do. Are you disappointed? That you fell in love with a criminal? Yes. That you risked everything to show him another path? Robert smiled sadly. That's exactly something your mother would do. Something I should have done more of myself. I have a proposition, Janice said, pulling out a folder. Stefano's providing evidence on the Castellano organization, turning state's witness on multiple RICO violations. But there are ethical complexities in organized crime cases that the DA's office doesn't always see. I want to consult. Help you understand the human side of these prosecutions. Robert studied the folder, then his daughter. You want to be a bridge between their world and ours. Someone has to be. And I've already crossed over. Might as well use it for something good. What about Stefano? Where does he fit in this new life? Janice's expression softened, pained. I don't know yet. But I'm willing to find out. The meeting happened at a neutral location. A coffee shop in the West Village, far from restaurants and warehouses and the weight of their shared past. Stefano arrived early, looking different. Still sharp, still dangerous, but wearing it differently now. The ice in his eyes had thawed into something more human. More vulnerable. You look good, Janice said, sitting across from him. You look terrified. A ghost of his old smile. Smart. I talked to Saracen, the FBI agent. He says you've been cooperating. Providing intelligence on human trafficking rings, weapons smuggling. Janice's voice held wonder. You're actually doing it. Dismantling the empire. Slowly. Can't burn it all down overnight without starting a war. Stefano stirred his coffee without drinking it. But the legitimate businesses are transitioning. Real estate, investments, the shipping company. All clean. We're getting there. And the rest. Marco's handling the transition. He thinks I've lost my mind, but he's loyal. Stefano finally met her eyes. The Castellanos got 25 years each. Federal prison. Isabella's killers are behind bars, and I didn't have to become one to put them there. Because of what you taught me. He reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. That justice is about the living. About preventing future harm. You saved me, Janice. Even when I didn't deserve it. You saved yourself. I just reminded you that you could. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid pressing between them. I love you, Stefano said quietly. I'm still angry about the lies, still processing the betrayal. But I love you. And I don't know what to do with that. Neither do I. Janice's eyes glistened. You're a criminal trying to go legitimate. I'm a DA's daughter consulting on organized crime. We're walking a line that could destroy us both. But redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing better futures. She finally took his hand. And I'd rather walk that line with you than watch you fall alone. Stefano's fingers tightened around hers. It won't be easy. The FBI's watching me. Your father probably hates me. Marco definitely hates you. And there are people in my organization who'll see this as weakness. Let them. Janice smiled through tears. We've already survived the impossible. Everything else is just details. Still a philosopher. Still a work in progress. They left the coffee shop together, walking into the Manhattan afternoon. Two broken people carrying ghosts, guilt, and the fragile hope that love might be enough to bridge the darkness between who they'd been and who they were becoming. Behind them, Saracen watched from an unmarked car, shaking her head. Think they'll make it? Her partner asked. Sarah thought about Janice's defiance, Stefano's transformation, the impossible choice that had saved them both. I don't know, she admitted. But if anyone can walk that line without falling, it's them. Because redemption wasn't a destination. It was a journey. And they'd only just begun.